Hello, I'm Rob, and today I will talk about plastic in the grocery store. So Environmental Defense released a report about plastic in the grocery store and how it's increasingly unavoidable. I don't understand why we have plastic in the grocery store for like items like fruits and vegetables when they already have perfect containers to keep them safe. And I've noticed the um, baby formula is no longer in jars and stuff like that. So those are two things that are concerning that I've seen in this report. And I know that like plastic is confusing for consumers because a lot of people might think that plastic is recyclable because they see it all the time or they see the recycling symbol. Those like pouches in this report. So I'll just start talking about this report. It's called Left Holding the Bag by Environmental Defense, and it was published April 18th. And it's regarding grocery stores and the audit of grocery stores by a group, Environmental Defense. They found that 76% of baby food is in plastic. Those 40,000 products, so huge amount of products identified. A variety of stores. Um, uh, Grocery stores incentivize the purchase of plastic wrapped produce. The price per weight of whole fruits and vegetables is cheaper when the produce is prepackaged in multiples than when it is sold unpackaged. And I know a lot, like, some people might just want one banana. Um, that's what my grandma used to do. She only wanted one banana. But if you have it packaged, you can't buy one product and then that other product might go to waste if it's not eaten in time. Um, and it doesn't really solve a health and safety benefit when you wrap everything in plastic. When the natural stuff already is packaged. Um, those pet food, it's shifting towards plastic packaging. 66% across all stores. Um, and then there's a quote: "If you shop at a major local grocery store, you'll not be able to avoid single-use packaging." And there's a growing movement to zero waste lifestyle to reduce the amount of environmental impact. And for a lot of people, like the big chain is the only option accessible because of urbanization, like suburbanization, urban sprawl policies. Um, so you might not get um, the local grocery store independent. Um, um, but urban sprawl is a different issue, but it's somewhat related. Um, Um, and then with less than 50% of all plastic packaging is recycled in Canada specifically. In Ontario, it's as low as 8% recycled. There's no deposit on a lot of containers, with the exception of alcoholic containers like bottles. Um, there's not really any incentive to recycle. Um, and it's a significant source of plastic waste. And this report is saying that the governments don't have plans to deal with them. I've noticed that like produce bags, they don't really advertise like reusable bags at all, and uh, the refill programs that were in existence before the pandemic have been eliminated, and I like without backing scientific backing, those there's no reason to ban reuse products due to the pandemic. Um, yeah, so the recommendations, they're saying to ban plastic packaging material that is not recycled at scale and has no prospect of effective and safe recycling. So, like examples like pouches, or one example. Require refill and reuse of 30% of retail packaging by 2030. And 2030 isn't that far away, um, realistically. Set a legal limit for labeling of hazardous chemicals in products. Um, urgently access chemicals used in packaging, including bisphenols and phyto phytalates, um, with the aim of elimination whole classes of hazardous chemicals from food packaging. And we know that bisphenols impact um, reproduction, human reproduction. Bisphenol A was banned, for example, um, because of that. And improve transparency of chemicals used in food packaging and set high targets. So that's the government. And retailers, they're saying that retailers are not on track to meet their own um, goals to reduce plastic waste. And then they're saying that environmental defense is saying that 90% of produce uh, should be free of plastic, and then there shouldn't be plastic for babies or toddlers, because they are a more vulnerable group of people. And then phase out the use of plastic pouches, wrappers, and films for all products. Introduce or scale up reuse and refill options, including return to retail of containers. Um, and then 2.2 million tons of plastic packaging is waste. 900,000 tons of plastic packaging are collected from Canadian households annually, and with only 15% being recycled, that's a huge loss. 40,000 products in 54 stores. 27% of items in the produce department were available with no added packaging. That's huge. And it's in the produce department where things already have natural containers. 71% of products in the produce section were packaged in plastic. Baby food was most likely to be packaged in plastic, 76%. Soup, least likely, 35%. And then there was some numbers, 76% for baby food, produce, 71%, pet food, 66, soups, 35, and overall average was 64. And then flexible stand-up pouches, bags, and wraps are almost impossible to reuse and virtually not recycled in Canada, according to Environmental Defense. And they're rapidly replacing recyclable materials such as metal and paper. That's especially the case in baby food. Like when I was a kid, a toddler back in the 80s, we used to have like miniature dolls um, for baby food. Um, so the companies are feeding us, or continue to introduce new plastic that is ending up in landfill. And then this report says that black people, indigenous people, people of color, and low income communities are most likely to be affected by plastic pollution in Canada and around the world. And yeah, like environmental pollution is going to impact those communities and individuals within those communities. And then there's like some damage to if they do get into the recycling bin, films and pouches, which they might because people view like all plastic as recyclable. They could get caught up and damage recycling facilities or contaminate other materials, so they all end up in the landfill. And then, yeah, I mentioned this like food waste, like the example of an individual wanting one item, instead they have to get two items or more when they only want one, and then they can only eat one. Those alternatives to plastic packaging for produce, no packaging for fruits and vegetables, or packaging when it's needed, like berries. It might make sense to have some packaging, but like reusable return policy for those instead of those clamshells. Um, yeah, babies might be ingesting microplastics, and then the vulnerable. I already mentioned the bisphenol A and human reproduction. Um, and then the alternatives, glass and paper, safe reusable containers that can be returned. And then, yeah, and then it's less likely for rigid plastic containers of wet pet food to be recycled than the cans that they replaced. Um, so alternative, safe metal and paper packaging, returnable containers. And then, like, even though the government of Canada has a policy of zero waste by 2030 to tackle single use plastic, They will not address the increasing use of non-recycled single-use packaging in the grocery store. And flexible pouches such as bags, pouches, and wrappers are not recycled. And food packaging might not be included in regulations. And then those other sections, and then those how different stores measure up. So none of them are really good. Uh, some are worse than others, and some of them didn't allow environmental defense to look at the packaging. And then there was a quote: "Recycling will not eliminate plastic pollution." Um, I don't, yeah, and then there was some other things, other recommendations. So, my friend on another channel showed this article: "Is Canada keeping promises on climate change? The globe tracks its progress." So I'll only highlight plastics on this, and then link my homie tutorial. So yeah, I was going to look at just plastic. The goal to end plastic pollution isn't doing too well. The pledge is that, well, plastic isn't tracked by greenhouse gas emissions, but they're tied to biodiversity and ocean health. But the pledge is to develop a zero plastic waste strategy, um, and there's an ocean plastics charter to reduce plastic litter in the world's ocean. Um, $13 billion worth of environmental damage is done every year. And then there's the Canadian Council Ministers of the Environment. Oh, they were the ones that published the zero waste strategy. So they want to reduce the amount of plastics and ban single use plastics. The status is in planning, so not good at all. Those plastic packaging to contain 50% recycled content by 2030. As of December 2022, regulations prohibit the input, manufacture, and sale in Canada of so-called single-use plastics such as cutlery, straws, and store sticks, which has been challenged in court. Um, and I looked at the court case, and it hasn't been. There's no decision, and it will impact what the government does. Um, and oh yes, the greenhouse Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions were released. Let's see. And then there's the plastic ban. There was an article called Ottawa's Plastic Ban Facing Industry Challenge and Closely Watched Court Case. It's a federal court case, and it will have an impact on whether the federal government can move ahead with regulating plastics under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. I think that the government will win the case, but it's hard to tell. And plastic waste is increasing worldwide. And then there's that's not. Then there was a blog post. Um, big, and then there was an article from Environmental Defense that says big plastic arguments against federal plastic regulations crumple in court. Uh, they argued about Totals, the chemical plastic company, and then they made the point that the government doesn't actually know how many Totals we've killed. Animal Justice pointed out that this approach shows a callous disregard for the well-being of animals. And then they pointed out the hypocrisy of using not all plastic, and that um, there was a precautionary approach um, to environmental law as well. And yes. Yeah, so yeah, I believe that the Canadian and provincial governments, as well as retailers, should do more to reduce plastics, change habits, and it should be possible to go to a grocery store and avoid uh, plastic containers. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.